Well, welcome everyone to Magical Aspirations. We are so excited to be back here in season 4, and we figured what no better way than to get started by welcoming back Denise Hancock to talk a little bit about astrology. So welcome back, Denise.
Thank you, Reverend Raven. I'm so happy to be here.
We're excited to have you, and I'm joined here by my fabulous co-host, Anna-Lisa. Say hello to the people.
Hello, people.
And I, of course, am Reverend Raven. We are giving this Zoom thing a go and letting you see our faces again. So we're a little nervous about that, but not as bad as last time. So we're just going to jump right on in. And Miss Denise is such a fabulous presenter. We figured this would be a great way for us to get back on the Zoom and in front of you guys. So Denise, if you will just remind the people a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your personal astrology.
Sure. So I am an astrologer in New Orleans who's had a professional practice where I've actually been doing services for other people for money for 3 years now. But I'd been studying astrology for more than 20 years and used it in my own life on a daily basis and to help guide me. Besides astrology, I'm also a registered nurse and a nurse educator. So I've worked in healthcare management. I've also done some financial work over the course of my life. And I feel like that whole background, the financial knowledge, the nursing knowledge, what I learned about being a manager, it all really feeds into my astrology practice, which is very client focused. I've studied modern astrology. I've studied some ancient astrology methods. I do a few different types or techniques with astrology, but it's all really based on helping each person to get what they need right now. And of course, everyone's going to be different depending on the cycles of life they're in, how their own birth chart is set up, and what the planets might be touching, activating in the birth chart.
So this is going to kind of lead right into what you were just saying, but tell us a little bit, what are your magical aspirations? How does astrology relate to where you want to go in life and with your magical practice?
That's a fascinating question. I don't think anyone specifically asked me that before. Um, I would say that my overarching goal, like for my own personal development, is to sort of live out the very best version of my birth chart that I can be. And in order to do that, you kind of have to understand what the birth chart is saying, that I have some innate strengths, that I have some innate gifts to offer. And I also have some specific things in life that may be normal, but aren't for me, are just not the way I was designed. And so learning to accept that has been huge. I'm still obviously developing. We all are, or we wouldn't be here. And this year, I'm doing daily planetary prayers. So each planet has a specific day of the week that's associated with that planet. And so what I'm trying this year to do magically is really use magic every day. And so part of that is starting the day with a prayer and a small ritual to the planet of the day. So today was the sun's day. So I lit a yellow candle and recited the Orphic hymn to the sun. And then I'm also doing, I don't know if you're familiar with Rune Soup, but I'm also doing their Sigil a Day project. And so I'm trying to do a daily sigil that sort of aligns with like that planet's purpose in my life. So I'm trying to sort of bring those worlds together.
Oh, I
That's
love
really
that.
neat.
That is, yeah,
Yes.
that's really, really beautiful. One of the things that I've also been focusing on this year is like the magical days of the week and really trying to ingrain some of the more mundane aspects of life and really enhance them and make them magical. Like present joy has really been the name of the game and like trying to like make my magic kind of do that for me. So I really love that we're kind of on the same page with that. I've got a question for you. I know in the last time that we had you on, we kind of briefly talked about the astrology of like places and things like that. I've noticed this trend of all of my magical people over the last 3 to 5 years. They're all leaving New Orleans. Is there anything astrological that you could contribute to that?
I don't know if that is so much astrological as it is really like financial and cultural and
Mm,
political. Although
mm,
certainly in the astrological sense, we're kind of in this big liminal period um, where we're moving into kind of a new age and new ideas and new technologies and new cultural standards and movements, but we haven't quite left the old behind. And so
mm,
I
mhm,
feel like there's so many people whose lives are in flux and they know what they're leaving behind and they don't yet know where they're going. And so because of that, I think there's just a lot of general movement.
mm.
But certainly in New Orleans, and I didn't pull out, I actually do have some charts for the city of New Orleans where you can look at how transits impact the city. And I haven't really looked at that in a while, but it seems like we're getting hit hard with this movement into the age of air, that New Orleans is really
Mhm.
kind of not a place of air. It's more a place of earth and water. And so like some of the infrastructure failures here, which Pluto in Capricorn really has illuminated in our world, now we're moving towards something new and different, but we're not there yet. So lots of mobility, I think, altogether from New Orleans, magical and not.
Mhm.
That is fascinating. I really like the way that you said about how we're moving into this place of air, because a lot of the people that I know are moving north, they're moving up, like literally. And God, New Orleans really is a place of water, of earth, of swamp, like it is all the
Yeah.
that's really fascinating for all of that to kind of tie in together. That's really cool.
Thanks for asking.
I'd say too, a lot of the movement that you're seeing, like I'll use myself as an example. I was a transplant, so I'm not from there. It was part of my journey to come to New Orleans and discover myself and learn more about magic and all of those great lessons that I got to learn. But it was time for me to leave. So it was part of my path to come to New Orleans, but I don't think that I was ever meant to stay.
And you're not the only person I've heard say that. In fact, I met a young woman this weekend um, named Helen, who is an astrologer and really came to New Orleans in 2017, and it just sort of opened up for her a whole nother world of thinking about spirits and ancestors and magic. And she may not stay here forever either, but no doubt New Orleans is such an important place of spirit. It's a collection of living and dead over many centuries that, and of course, all the, if you think about everything that comes down the Mississippi River and passes through here, right? It's like we collect all this energy that swirls around in the city. But yeah, I don't know what the future holds. I think we need some air here that so far we're not seeing.
That's awesome. What so that leads me into the next thing that I know we wanted to talk about, some 2024 outlook stuff, like either through the next month, the next 6 months. I do know that, to let everyone know, Denise is going to be back at the end of the season, so she's going to be making sure that we all paid attention this time.
Is this your first episode for season 4?
This will be our second episode.
Second. Oh, because I hadn't seen the first one
Mhm.
yet.
It's coming out in the next couple of days here.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, we started off the year with all the planets, the 10 planets, all turning direct by early January. And so we're kind of in this period of time right now where things are going really fast and they're moving forward in a way that you have a lot of ability to control things. Like you can sort of set your goals, move towards your goals, put your plans in motion, manifest what you want. And we're really full steam ahead on that until kind of the end of March. And we have eclipses, twice a year, most years. And so we have our first set of eclipses March 25th. There's an eclipse at 5 Libra. And then on April the 8th, there's an eclipse at 20 Aries. And you've probably heard about that one because it's going to be visible across the United States. So a lot of people I know are traveling to see it. So April's coming to be a big month where like things get shaken up and there may be lots of circumstances that are outside our control. We have the eclipses starting late March. Mercury's going to be retrograde in April. We also have a coming together of two of the really big important planets that only meet each other every 13 to 14 years, and that's Jupiter and Uranus. And that tends to bring lots of unexpected innovations, new ideas, experiments, like surprise things into the world. So I've been telling my clients to use this next 1 month period to kind of restock your life, like rest a little bit and put things in place so that you'll be prepared for potentially more chaos in the month of April. And so for me, that looked like I resubscribed to a meal delivery service, right? Because I know March and April are going to be really busy. So I'm like, how can I at least make sure I have fresh, easy food in the house, right? But also just like anything you can do to sort of streamline your life, knowing that there may be things outside of your control, you know, in ways that we don't have right now. I'm not predicting disasters. I just think there's going to be much more sort of external disruption, you know, to your schedules, to your plans, to other people in your life. So then interestingly, at the end of May, the planet Jupiter has been in the sign of Taurus. So it's going to meet Uranus in Taurus in April, and then it's going to move into Gemini for a year. And so one of the things to think about on a personal basis is, where is Gemini in your chart? Because that's going to be sort of a buoyant boost in that part of your life, bringing new opportunities, new potential, some hope, some growth, some expansion. I think the pace of our lives isn't going to slow down. It's actually going to pick up more. Jupiter in Gemini tends to be a really very busy time in terms of news stories and gossip and messages and breaking news and innovations. So I think that it's an exciting year on that regard. And then the summer, there's kind of not a whole lot going on, you know, in the cosmos. There's not a lot of big planetary activity. But August is another month like April where there's a whole lot of things kind of popping off. So in August, we have another Mercury retrograde, and this one is in Virgo. And then we have sort of Mars and Jupiter coming together in Gemini and making a tough aspect with the planet Saturn across the signs of Gemini and Pisces. It's called a square aspect. And it's usually like uncomfortable things that require some sort of an adjustment. So the fact that we have that together coming with a Mercury retrograde, kind of a big deal, I think. Then we get to late September and early October, and we have the next set of eclipses. September 17th, we have a lunar eclipse in Pisces at 26 Pisces. And this is the first one we're going to have on the Virgo Pisces axis. So starting next year, we'll have more of those. For this year, it's the people who have planets and rising signs like in Libra and Aries that are really getting the eclipse energy. So the second eclipse on October 2nd is a solar eclipse at 10 Libra. And I don't believe either one of these are going to be highly visible in the US, if at all. And then things kind of quiet down again a little bit until we get towards the holidays. And actually, the holiday period this year looks like it could be a little disruptive. We've got a Mercury retrograde starting like either Thanksgiving or the day after Thanksgiving, right? So all that post-holiday and before Christmas travel. So, you know, if you're the person who celebrates holidays and you want to do a lot of shopping or planning, I would try to get all that stuff done before Thanksgiving. And then we'll have Jupiter's going to be stationing, going retrograde and squaring Pisces again on Christmas Eve. So it may be bringing up those things that it stirred up in August. So it does look to me like it could be kind of a complicated holiday season. So for myself, I'm thinking about, well, maybe I don't want to fly. Maybe if I go somewhere, I want to drive where I can control the schedule and, you know, have a plan B. So if what I want to do doesn't work out. So those are kind of the hot points of the year. So overall, I think it's going to be a really fast year that only picks up the pace. We will have planets going retrograde as usual in the back half of the year. So starting kind of in April, I think we have more disruptions from outside ourselves. And so I really think that this sets, Anna-Lisa, you and me both up for, you know, doing these daily rituals that we can control. Like, if nothing else, we can control our morning. Like, we can control our intention for the day, right? And
That is
whatever
accurate,
happens
yes.
after that, we just deal with, we respond.
Right.
Yeah.
Very.
I did a
Oh my
whole lot
God,
of talking and I saw you guys scribbling notes.
Yeah, I was about to say, I just took so many notes. Oh, wow. Okay.
The good thing is we can re-listen and
Yes.
digest it.
Yes.
I was just trying to get some
Yes.
of those highlight kind of time frames and some things that stuck out to me, which are kind of cool, is that we restart the year in March, in Aries season. So it's kind of interesting that the end of March comes and then the eclipses start.
Yeah.
And so there's that energy there. And actually, where I'm living now, in Warren, Indiana, we're the furthest south that sees totality. So we will have
wow.
totality in my small town, and they are trying to figure out how they're going to handle school. But we are going to have a festival that day for the eclipse. For the solar eclipse, which happens to be my dad's birthday, who he's the reason that I moved here to where I'm at right now. This is where he grew up. So that eclipse is on his birthday and also the day that my husband's father passed away. So that's a very significant date for us, and I'm really interested to see what happens with that. I'm seeing some opportunities for partnership within the community with the eclipse as well, maybe working with a small town and the local library to help with this event.
There's an astrologer named Bernadette Brady who actually teaches at a university in Wales, I believe. But she's done a whole series of work about eclipses come in families, and like a specific eclipse family, which is called a Saros series. It recurs over hundreds and thousands of years, right? It's like a pattern that moves around the earth from the North Pole to the South Pole, or the South Pole to the North Pole. And so the particular eclipse period, the one that's coming this spring, the original connotations of that eclipse are that it tends to be like bring inspiration, innovation, flashes of genius, insight, which is very much like this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction we're also having in April. So I feel relatively positive about the set of eclipses that are coming this spring. The ones in the fall have a slightly different connotation, which is more about endings and separations and losses. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in each of our own lives. And generally, an eclipse doesn't necessarily impact you personally unless you happen to have like your ascendant, your rising sign, your midheaven, your sun, your moon, an important planet that is within like 5 to 7 degrees of that eclipse point. And I noticed that at least one of you do. I think, Reverend Raven, that you really didn't. When I looked at your birth chart yesterday, there's not a lot that looks like the eclipses necessarily bringing any big, huge things to your life. But I guess it was Adriana who looked like she had the most personal eclipses, although Anna-Lisa, it looks like the October one will personally impact you because you have a moon in Libra at 13 degrees. So that one probably isn't a big deal. I mean, we all get them eventually.
We all get them, but I am grateful for the heads up.
Yeah. And there, you know what? There is one other thing I wanted to talk about that's happening in the winter, really, and I forgot as I was going through the things, but normally Mars travels pretty fast, and he goes through his zodiac sign in about 6 weeks. This year we'll be having a Mars retrograde that starts in the fall. And so that's another thing that you want to pay close attention in your personal chart to what's going on there, because Mars is going to be in the signs of Cancer and Leo for months and months, from September 24 to June of 2025. So again, when we look at your personal charts later, I'll tell you if that I think impacts you more personally. But usually when Mars is in a part of your chart, he is like whipping up some energy. And sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it's aggravating, sometimes it's a huge burst of like, let's get things done, busy, 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 you know, so it can be different for every person. But that is something else to be aware of. We actually don't have a Venus retrograde this year. We had one last summer, but Venus only retrogrades every couple of years. She's not retrograding in 2024, but Mars is back.
Always stirring up mess, that Mars. My
Yeah.
goodness, my
Yeah.
goodness.
Some
That
people have a harder time with Mars than others, but definitely you notice when Mars is in the house.
Mm, fascinating. Oh, that's fascinating. You had mentioned before we hopped on here that there was that each of us, Adriana, Rev, and I, all have Aries at 29 degrees somewhere. I'm like chomping at the bit to know what that's about. If you
Okay,
could delve further, we
I
would
will. In
greatly
fact, this is
appreciate.
one of those things that I think I will bring up charts if you don't mind letting me share.
Of course.
It's one of those things where, you know, as I pulled your charts, like I didn't even look at them together. It just jumped at me. I was like, oh, wait, I've seen that before. Oh, can you enable screen sharing?
Let's see. Bear with me.
Mhm.
Do we know how to do that? Mm. Try now, maybe?
Yes.
Excellent.
All right. I'm going to see if it'll let me mark it up here. So the thing that jumped out at me when I was looking at the three of your charts, and this is actually what we call a tri-wheel. So the middle circle in here is Reverend Raven's chart. Anna-Lisa's is in the middle, and then the outer one is Adriana's. And so I immediately noticed here, Adriana has a moon that is at 29 degrees Aries. Anna-Lisa has a sun at 29 degrees Aries. And Reverend Raven has Venus at 29 degrees Aries. And I was like, wow. Those are what we would call the personal planets, right? They're close to Earth, so they're about like your daily needs, your purpose in life, your emotions, your bodies, your friendships, your values, your relationships. And each zodiac sign is 30 degrees, right? So you all have this really important personal placement at the very last degree of Aries. You know, the final degree before it turns into Taurus. And so astrologers would tell you that the first degree and the last degree of a sign are kind of like the most potent of that sign. Like when a planet enters a new zodiac sign, it's like jumping in, you know, I'm all about it. And when it's about to leave, it's like, oh, I got to get all the stuff done. Like, you know, this is my last chance, like cramming before finals. And so that's a really powerful energy that is called cardinal fire. And it's about getting things done, like acting from the heart, following your passion, making your mark on the world, being willing to change and change quickly. And it's kind of fascinating to me because, you know, I talked about Pluto in Capricorn earlier when we were talking about New Orleans. So for the last year and a half or so, 2 years, Pluto has been hovering at the very end of Capricorn here, and right at the end of Aquarius here. And so all three of you have been experiencing Pluto squaring this 29-degree placement in your chart. It's going to happen one more time. Pluto moves very slowly. It takes Pluto almost 250 years to go around the zodiac, and it retrogrades half the year, right? So it's like grinding over a specific spot in the sky. And so it would be interesting to see when you started this podcast, because I'm wondering if it was this Pluto transit that sort of pushed you all together and helped you like do this extraordinarily empowering, like passionate project together. And Pluto's going to move away finally from this spot in the fall. Pluto's going to come back one more time and make a direct square to all of your placements there. And then it'll move on next year. And so that really made me kind of wonder, like, would this be your last season? You know, have you come together for a reason? Have you accomplished what you wanted to accomplish? And will you decide to move on after this episode? Now, you all
How
practice
very
tarot, right?
yes, yes.
So the tarot card that sort of coordinates with this particular part of Aries is the Four of Wands. I know you're probably familiar with that card. It shows
Mm-hmm.
like a couple of figures kind of holding up their hands in the air as though they're cheerleading. Like, so it looks like a party, a celebration. And this is a place where essentially the Empress and the Emperor come together. It's the Emperor's house, you know, it's a warrior's house, it's a military house, it's a castle that's been won by battle, but it's all this like divine feminine energy that's trying to like make it beautiful and cheer it up. And so to me, that sort of resonates with the feeling I get having been listening to, you know, your podcast and getting to know you all just a little bit in these last few seasons, that you all have this beautiful personal placement in that decan of Aries that is about the Four of Wands energy.
Wow. Wow. That's insane. So a couple of questions. We started officially the first date that we released was 2/22 of 22.
Mhm.
And then we probably started planning about 6 months before that. So that would
Yeah,
have
so
been
that would
like,
have definitely been coordinating with these Pluto transits.
oh, how very fascinating. And
Yeah.
even I find it fascinating that you brought up the possibility of maybe this coming to an end or an ending of some sort. We did recently in this past season decide the last 2 years we've done 2 seasons a year. We've kind of split them up in between. And this year we decided we'll do probably about February to about the end of the fall. So maybe if it's not even the ending of this altogether, we will be hitting an ending point at about that point. That is, oh, that gives me chillies. That's
It does me
fascinating.
too. They're going up and down my spine. And when I saw that yesterday, I was like, oh, I have to tell you about this. Like it came up as something that, you know, it just like I said, I wasn't even looking at your charts together. It was just that 29 Aries stood out for me again. And I was like, oh, wait, saw that again. Oh, wait, saw that again. Huh, this is crazy. Yeah.
That
There's
is,
other
wow.
synastry between you, kind of in pairs, but that's the one thing that really hits for all three of you.
I think it's really interesting. I've never looked at all three of our charts overlap together, but that each of us has a place, at least one house where a lot of things are clustered. That there are a lot of planets clustered in one house. And
Yeah, we call those stelliums, and yes,
okay.
you do all have stelliums. And stelliums are often people that how do I it's like people who have to face big transformations because it's like oftentimes when if you have a stellium of planets that are all close together, then many times if something like Saturn or Jupiter or Pluto is going through that part of your chart, it's like you're going to have to deal with lots of big changes all in a row. You know, you're
Okay.
not a person who just changes jobs. You change jobs and you move states and you change houses. And, you know, it's like,
Uh, yeah.
so you all definitely have some of that energy going on, whether it's either because you have things clustered in a specific degree or you have, you know, several things clustered in one part of the chart. So big transformations, like that's, you know, that's part of who each
Mhm.
of you are in different ways.
Wow. Wow.
So I am
It is,
looking here at Anna-Lisa in my seventh house
Hmm.
here that we both have a lot, yeah, going on there.
Yeah, you do. Now, you were both born in a time where Uranus and Neptune were in Capricorn, and Annalisa also has Saturn there. You don't, but there is a sort of a sub generation of people um, in the late 80s and in the 90s who had those two big major planets in the sign of Capricorn at the same time. And I specifically find the group that was born in 89 and 90 really interesting because you had Saturn there too. And so, you know, the planet Neptune is all about the big vision, imagination, compassion, like oneness, the big picture. Uranus is all about sort of disrupting the norm and revolution and rebellion and liberation and flashes of insight. Uranus is very disruptive. Neptune can almost be a little bit of escapist. It's very like dreamer energy. But when you've got Saturn in that mix too, Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, and it's like about making things real. And so, no pressure, Anna-Lisa, but I feel like your specific subgroup of people, like you're here to sort of disrupt the world. You can actually like make the dream real. Like you have the vision that a lot of people haven't had before. You have the insight, and you actually know how to do the work to make it happen. And so as Pluto moves through Aquarius in the coming 20 years, we're going to see a real trend of the baby boomers kind of finally falling out of power, right? And it's interesting because they're actually having a Pluto opposition if they have Pluto in Leo, like President Biden, former President Trump. A lot of people in their generation, they were born when Pluto was in Leo. And it's a very sort of egocentric placement, Pluto and Leo. And they're about to face big transformations, right? Because Pluto is opposite their Pluto, which doesn't happen for many generations. And it's going to be really their turning over of power. And I feel like the group of people that are born in your generation are going to be stepping up in a big way. I'm part of Gen X, which is a much smaller group of people and kind of in the middle, but it's you that are really going to, I think, be the ones who step up and fill in the power vacuums and make the changes to bring us into that age of air I was talking about.
This magic is so unbelievably real. Like, I don't understand how sometimes when people get information like this put in front of them and so everything that you just said about, my generation and kind of things like that, it's this weird inner feeling that I've always had, but I've never really been able to articulate, like, especially about like, you talking about like us pushing up against the boomers, and it just brings this one memory of me being, I don't know, sometime between, let's say, like 9 and 12, like sometime in that age range, and like fighting with an uncle of mine about like a relatively mature subject that, like, looking back on that now, I can be like, I can obviously look at it with an adult eyes because I'm going to be 35 this year. But everyone was so surprised at the take I had on the stance that I was really fighting against. And they were like, oh, look at this little young thing, like really articulating her opinion and her voice. And it's just really fascinating that it's all of the people that were around me that we grew up with, that this is the time we're supposed to be. Oh, fascinating. You've got my wheels turning, Miss Denise.
Yeah, you're really sort of kicked off a really, like, when Uranus and Neptune came together, like it kicked off a really big, powerful, like long-term cycle, right? And so you've embodied that energy. My generation was born right after, like I was born when Jupiter, Pluto, and Uranus came together in the late 1960s, right? And so I also carry that sort of sexual revolution, social justice revolution. Like I carry that kind of energy because in my chart, because that's when I was born. And yours is a little different. It's more about like a whole new world. Seeing the world in a different place, taking care of the world, the relationship with the earth, like those kinds of things.
Wow. Wow. That's really fascinating. Is there anything else that jumped out for you in our charts as either surprising or something that like makes an astrologer go, ooh?
Not altogether as a whole. Like certainly individually, there were some things that I noticed whenever you want to, if when and if you want to talk about individual charts, you were all either coming into or going into a really important Jupiter cycle. The cycles you have are different, but each of you were about to face sort of a big Jupiter turning point. Jupiter is a planet that takes about 12 years to go around the zodiac, so it's relatively slow, not as slow as Pluto. But Venus goes around in about a year, right? So way faster than Venus and Mars, way slower than Venus and Mars. And you're both kind of coming into either the Jupiter return or the Jupiter opposition. Reverend Raven, yours is you are looking at a Jupiter opposition. So when Jupiter's at the halfway point, almost like Jupiter is making a full moon to your own Jupiter. And that's coming for you at the end of May, on May 30th. And Anna-Lisa, you are going into a Jupiter return on June 25th, where Jupiter, it was kind of like your Jupiter birthday. Adriana is not with us, but she is also going into a Jupiter opposition this year. And that is March 10th for her. So that's kind of interesting too, because these are things that only happen like the returns are every 12 years and the oppositions are every 12 years. So essentially every 6 years you have a big Jupiter cycle. So again, that made me think something about the work you're doing together. This is a time of changing it up. And it may mean opening new doors or deciding to do things differently, but I feel like, you know, you're all sharing kind of this Jupiter cycle energy, which is sort of interesting. So all of you had either a Jupiter that was in Gemini, or in Sagittarius, right? So Reverend Raven's Jupiter is at 1 degree Sagittarius. Anna-Lisa's is 7 degrees of Gemini, and Adriana's is at oh, I'm sorry, hers is at 14 degrees Taurus, or 14 degrees Scorpio. So she's actually having her Jupiter opposition while Jupiter is still in Taurus before Jupiter hits Uranus. But they're all happening this year. For me, Jupiter has, like when I track this Jupiter cycles in my life, the returns and the oppositions, I can see where I made big decisions. I've been married twice. One of those weddings was at a Jupiter return. One of them was at a Jupiter opposition. I've also like started school, like started a new educational program or started a new career direction on Jupiter returns, Jupiter oppositions. So it tends to be those sort of big life-changing sort of pivots that you make. And Jupiter generally brings you opportunities. The problem with Jupiter is I think of Jupiter as like a match funder. Like, so you put in the work, you put in the effort, you say what you want, Jupiter says yes. But Jupiter doesn't give you good judgment necessarily, right? So sometimes what Jupiter says yes to are things that you will ultimately regret or, you know, become lessons or challenges. So when you have these Jupiter cycles, it's really important for you to be discerning and make sure that you are truly pursuing things that you want. It's like those years when you're like, as my grandma used to say, be careful what you wish for because you're likely to get it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop sharing the 3 screens together and see where we go from here.
I find that really interesting because with my current job that I have, I finish my contract on Memorial Day.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm trying to, you know, I'm figuring out what I'm going to do because I'm off of work for 2 months over this summer. And I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do to make money, but also where do I see myself going in the future? And I've had a lot of ideas of expansion since the move, which was last summer. And that was while the Venus was retrograde. I dealt with a lot of big things and big lessons about self-worth during that time frame. So I'm curious to see where this ends up.
Do you want to go ahead and segue into one of the things you had asked me to do to prepare was to give you sort of homework, if you will, about your individual charts. Do you want to segue at this point to looking at your individual
Sure,
chart?
yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. I'm going to start with Reverend Raven. So I'm putting your chart up. So I did just really simple sort of forecasting to kind of see what part of life you were in and what is coming for you. And just to let everyone at home know, Reverend Raven's birthday is August 1st of 1983.
Yes, I'm old.
Yeah. And 12:45 in the morning in Hammond, Indiana. And so you're 40 right now.
Yes, ma'am.
And so in the big scheme of life, you were in the middle of what's called the midlife transits.
Mm-hmm.
The midlife transits like happen to everyone if you live long enough, right? But it's when you have a series of 3 big outer planet transits to your birth chart, and it happens usually between the ages of 38 and 43, sometimes as late as 45. And so you've had the first one, which is sort of getting rid of the old stuff. You've had your Pluto square Pluto. It's moving away. You are in the middle of Neptune square Neptune right now, which I call into the fog. Like, you know, you're going in a new direction. You know, you're making changes. It's not clear. And it isn't going to be clear for a while. And so what you're doing right now, the contract you have, the work you're doing, and probably the work you're doing next year isn't really what you're going to be doing 3 years from now. It's like you're trying things. It's like you're learning to swim, right? You're not exactly graceful. You're not exactly which direction you're going when you're under the water. You're just like trying to find your way. So clarity, I think, will start to come in for you more like 2025, 26, when Uranus opposes your Uranus and you suddenly get this new passion, this new inspiration. And so some of the homework that I would give you, which is actually really tough homework, is to give yourself permission to not know. And it's hard to measure, right? But you're a person who likes to do things. You like to have a direction. You're very, you have a very strong, like, mercurial energy in your chart. And so giving yourself permission to not know the answers and to trust that by 2 years from now, you're gonna know. But this is kind of your lost space. This is your, like, just trying things, meeting people. I think Jupiter is going to come in and introduce you to people and show you opportunities, which 2 years from now, you will find those things meaningful, but you may not even see at the time that they matter. This year of your life has very much, I think it's hilarious that you're working with children, because this particular year of your life, your 5th house, was really the house that was activated for you for your birthday, which is the house of children and creativity, creative projects, but also literally children. And so at your next birthday, which is coming up soon in August, the house that gets activated is your 6th house, which is more about duties, obligations, responsibilities, the things you have to do to maintain life. Sometimes it's also really associated with pets and small animals. And so it makes me wonder if you're maybe going to go back into a role of working with animals in that coming year. Sometimes when people move into that 6th house year, I really caution you to be careful about your health, because it's a time when there can be more illnesses and injuries, and but also just things that are sort of like drudge work, the things you don't get thanked for, you know, health maintenance things, obligations you have to people, whether it's because you're required to do it or you've chosen to do it. But it's almost like a servitude kind of position. So it's a little bit more of a less exciting change year, perhaps, but lots of busyness and doing, and like, it makes me wonder if you're going to be back and working with animals. But again, I think you're going to be making big directional changes. It's just not clear yet what those are. So it's just like, what are you doing while you're treading water?
That makes so much sense.
For you, that Mars retrograde I talked about is going to be right around the part of your home and your family. And so again, it made me wonder if you're going to have some kind of family responsibilities that you might need to be taking care of that really takes a lot of your attention next year. Home, family, ancestors. It also would be a really great time to do any sort of ancestral work during that Mars retrograde.
And when would that be? I'm sorry.
Well, Mars moves into Cancer September the 5th. It moves into Leo, so it's going to be right on your part of home in November. And then it's going to go retrograde. So it's going to hit this place of your home 3 times in December, in November, in December, and in February. So that's why I'm like wondering, you know, something about your home, your family, your roots, your foundation that's really going to need your attention over the winter time. So I don't know how we measure homework, but my homework is give yourself permission to not know.
That's a very difficult thing for
me
to do. Yes, but I've been practicing that since this time last year.
Yeah, and I think I think what's going to come up is there's going to be things that are sort of where you feel like you need to sort of set aside some of your own agenda to support some
Mhm.
other people. Like that's the kind of the feel that I get overall for the year, perhaps.
Okay.
So maybe
There,
you may be doing a lot of work where you're not seeing the progress, and that's okay. Progress comes later.
okay.
After this sort of buckle down year, then I think once you get to 25 and 26, when you've got your Uranus opposition, and from then you move into an angular house, which tends to be more filled with excitement and big changes and being able to get things done.
There are big questions about my ancestral farmland
Oh,
and where we see that going and that kind of thing.
okay. Well, that may be very well what you're working on this winter,
Mhm.
whether it's research or contract,
Mhm.
yeah. Anything else, or shall we move on to Anna-Lisa?
Mm, I had a question that I can't remember right now.
Okay.
So we can move on.
I'm just taking a quick look at my notes to see if there was anything else I wrote down, but I think I hit the highlights. Again, I saw May 30th as that Jupiter opposition period. And so, you may notice something end of April or end of May there. And you know what? You have Jupiter and Uranus in your chart conjunct together. And so that's why I think this spring, the Jupiter Uranus conjunction will be like some kind of big breakthrough, big exciting news, some kind of flash of genius thing, because that's something you have natally. So the fact it's coming together again is kind of an activation of your chart. And then you have that Jupiter opposition at the end of May. So I think it'll be really interesting, whether it's a job or it's something about your ancestry, a legacy. But there may be some like kind of interesting, exciting, transformative news that comes in for you April and May.
And what is the eighth house again? What is that rule?
Um, the eighth house is so there's three houses in the horoscope that are considered to be kind of like the dark houses or the less fortunate houses, and the eighth is one of those. However, it is inheritances, right? Which can be both good and bad, right? Because on one hand, an inheritance usually is a gift that was given to you. On the other hand, you oftentimes have to lose people to get it, right? Um, it's often associated with things like debts and taxes and like endings, losses, dealing with issues around mortality, that kind of stuff. But Jupiter is actually going to be, when it gets into Gemini in May, it'll be in your house of like possessions and resources. So again, I'm just wondering if it's not something about this family, you know, ancestral land, family issues, and resources and how they're allocated, or how they're able to be used. Maybe that comes up.
Mm-hmm. I really think that has something to do with it, and that's why we are here.
Probably. But just know that whatever it is, oftentimes if the eighth house gets activated, there's some unpleasantness that goes with it. There's some fears or some anxieties. Sometimes there's like some debts to be paid in some way, right? But you will come out of it, right? And you will get through it, and things will look better a year and 2 years from now.
Right. And I'm interested to see kind of what happens with all of that, because part of what goes along with the family farmland is whenever my dad was a young boy, his father passed away who owned the farm, and they had to sell a majority of the land and the cattle that was on it. So there is a lot of, I would say, generational trauma with that as well, with the farmland, with his dad passing away and him wanting to be able to get the land back. So he
Well, and
purchased.
your North Node is also in Gemini, right? And North Node often shows kind of things that are in the future, things that you're hungry for, things that you're going to, part of your pathway, your evolutionary pathway of like taking care of these resources, perhaps, right? So
Mhm.
Jupiter going through Gemini, I think will be, a move for you. Like there'll be something pivotal about this coming year between May of 2024 and May of 2025 that like opens the door to new opportunities or sends you in new directions that will ultimately impact your resources and your legacy.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Shall we do you next, Anna-Lisa?
Let's do it.
Do it. Stop sharing this one. Okay, so you were born April 19th of 1989 at 10:40 in the morning in Jefferson, Louisiana. And you are 34 now, and you're going to turn 35 in April, right?
Correct.
So, you're kind of in between big developmental stages. You had your Saturn return, and you're still probably integrating some of the lessons you learned with that. And you're not yet to the midlife transits. Those will start in 3 or 4 years for you. And this may surprise you, but as I looked at the upcoming year for you, starting at your birthday, I almost wonder if it's not going to be a year for you of kind of pulling back a little bit, spending more time, like kind of what I would call in the studio, you know, choosing to sort of withdraw from some of your obligations to pare down what you've been doing, and really like focus on things that are personal and private and kind of under the surface for you. What's coming up for you is a year that's focused on 12th house matters, and 12th house matters often are a retreat, an isolation, a withdrawal. In traditional astrology, they were often associated with things like jail or prison, where you were physically isolated. I frequently see them these days in the charts because I'm in healthcare of lots of people that work in hospital systems, who take care of other people, or who work for like big organizations. It also really is associated with like doing spirit work, and particularly because you have Gemini there, which is like mental energy, thoughts, and ideas. It's an intellectual placement for you. You also have Jupiter there, where you're going to have your Jupiter return. And so, a really good focus for you this year, and I know you already have practices, is but to really, again, be focused on private practice and your own ancestral work, right? Your own spirits and guides, and like the things that you don't share in public. If you've ever wanted to do some kind of a creative project or a writing project that involves lots of time alone, this is the year to do it. Am I hitting?
Oh, you mean like writing a book?
Yes. Yes, that is exactly what I mean. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Continue, please.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the time.
Okay.
Mhm. Um, Other than that eclipse for you in the fall, an eclipse for you hitting your moon in Libra could again mean there's something around your home or your family or your mother that like has some issues to deal with. So that's a possibility. The Mars retrograde really isn't going to impact you, I don't think, much at all. It is going to be in your first house, but it's not hitting any planets, and it's pretty far away from your ascendant. But there could be some issues coming up around like your time, your energy, your resources. However, if you are in the studio writing a book, then that makes a lot of sense. It's like, because you're investing a lot of time and energy in doing things and redoing things that are very personal to you, that have more to do with like you and your stuff and not so much about the world around you.
Hmm.
So that might really just impact your energy level. You might also really plan for the Mars and the Mercury retrograde periods to be times of like editing. It's like right, stop, review, edit, fix, those kinds of things. And I gave you those Mercury retrograde and Mars retrograde dates again, but the the Mercury retrogrades were essentially August, the month of August, from the 4th to the 28th. And then again around Christmas time, from Thanksgiving to almost Christmas. And then Mars will also be retrograde during that time period. So over the holidays is probably a really good time to just sort of review your progress and redo things. I do often see 12th house years as sometimes they can be tough mentally. And it can be things like overanalyzing, ruminating, being hard on yourself, critical on yourself, overthinking, like that kind of like mental activity, right? And so I guess a similar homework would be to take care of your mental health. And so maybe that means making sure you're drinking enough water, make sure you get fresh air every day, like those kinds of routines, so that you take good care of your mind while you're doing this solo work.
This is amazing. This is just amazing. I really am. Can I ask you a question briefly that has nothing to do with my chart, but more, I didn't realize that you were so into tarot. Do you find like intuitive information, like all the rest of us, just come like flying out of your mouth and it almost surprises you with how much it correlates with the chart?
Yes. And it's a lot, astrology is a lot like tarot in that the planets and the houses can have many different symbolisms. Like a card can mean many different things. Somehow it starts clicking as to which meaning it is, right? So yes, I do. And while I did some homework yesterday and I wrote a few notes, I mean, I don't know you that well, right? So I didn't know if you had a writing project.
No.
You know, so yes, but it makes perfect sense because Gemini, writing, communication, words, ideas, right? That's your 12th house. You've got Jupiter there, you've got Mars there. So it's going to be a place where it has really good things for you and it also has difficulties for you, right? Because Mars is a planet that can be irritating and aggravating, and Mars in Gemini likes to think too much, right? And so you might even undo yourself by like overthinking things, right? On the other hand, Jupiter can bring you opportunities and yeses, right? And you've got that energy coming into you in two different ways next year. One, because Jupiter's moving into Gemini, it's going to be there for a year. And the other is because you are personally moving into a 12th house year.
Wow. Okay. As someone who has not looked at her chart probably nearly, especially like this diagram, I've got like it all written down and broken down. What are the red and the blue going on in the middle? What do those mean? Remind us and the folks, please.
I will. So the red and the blue lines are what are called aspect lines. And this is an astrology software, so I can actually set it to show me the aspect lines the way I want to see them and only the ones I want to see. So you could well see different lines in different colors showing up in different ways in other places, right? This is my specs, if you will. Essentially, the red lines are where the planets don't necessarily get along with each other. It shows what we call an opposition or a square. So, for example, you've got your rising sign at 6 degrees Cancer with Chiron, who's an asteroid comet hybrid creature. And then across from that is Uranus. And so it may be that in your life, you wanted some stability and some ritual and some security, and someone outside of you interrupted that. And so you found yourself having to adjust, right? So that was kind of like built into the birth chart. You also have an opposition between Pluto in Scorpio and your Mercury in Taurus. So there's probably a part of you, because you have Venus and Mercury, which again, likes stability, likes to be peaceful. But on the other hand, you're going to call out shit when you see it, right? So there's this tension between don't really want to rock the boat, have to rock the boat. The blue lines instead are planets that are like supportive and friendly and helpful to each other. So those are like positive aspects, you know, like a friend you're waving at across the room who, you know, you can communicate with each other. So while that Uranus may bother you personally, yourself, your identity, it actually is pretty supportive for your ability to communicate, to think, to be in relationships with people who are a little outside the norm, like that kind of stuff, you know? So yeah, it shows relationships.
Okay, very cool. Thank you for explaining that because I've definitely read what it is about and it's never actually clicked in such a way that clarifies a whole lot. And another question that I have that I know the answer to, but I'm just fascinated at how you're going to answer it. When you look at people's charts and things like this, and then you start to get to know them. So, like, no, we don't personally know each other very well, but I know you've listened to the podcast. We've had quite a few conversations. Do they tend to match up like in a similar surprising way to you?
Yeah, yeah. There's some things like there's some things that I can sort of, I guess, make some assumptions about in a person when I look at their astrological chart. But then there's other things that will like totally surprise me. You know, it's like, oh, that's how you're embodying that energy. You know, it's like out of times with people's vocations, it's like you can see these underlying things about what are the skills, what are the things you're good at, what do you like to do, but then the way it actually plays out in your life, you know, could be really, really different.
Okay, fascinating. So, like,
But
can you
yes.
see from Rev and I's charts that we work with animals? Like, does that stand out in a certain way?
Um, what I can see
I
from
guess
your
it.
chart, so here's what I would see from your chart that would maybe give that to me. One is that you do have this, Cancer is your rising sign. So you embody in yourself, in your identity, in like your purpose, you kind of I embody a maternal, a caretaking energy. Now that might mean that you truly have children. However, I also see that Scorpio is on your fifth house with Pluto in there. And so it might not be. So it might be that you take care of other things, that you're mothering a community, or you're mothering animals, or you're mothering something else, right? Like, but I'm sure like your friends see you as someone who's nurturing and caring and sensitive and sort of maternal in some
Mhm.
ways. When I look at small animals like pets, I look at the sixth house, for example. And so your sixth house is Sagittarius, where you do have something called the lot of fortune, which can mean a bunch of different things. And it's ruled by Jupiter. Um, Jupiter is in Gemini. So again, that would make me two of things or small things. So I would expect that you probably have smaller animals, but the 12th house actually represents like livestock, like goats, cows, horses, you know, pigs, like those kinds of things. You also do have Venus and Mercury and Ceres. Ceres is like the energy of Demeter, you know, the mother of Persephone. And that is a very like fertility goddess, goddess of the harvest, of earthly things. So you've got Venus and Ceres in that kind of, again, earth goddess, maternal, taking care of the earth, animals, people, you know, so you do have that kind of energy in your chart. But you could be using it in a lot of different ways. It's also oftentimes Venus and Taurus, you also often see with people who are like really into makeup and style, or flower designing and gardening, or even like some kind of artwork or music or pottery. Like those things would also resonate with me.
That is, so
Yeah,
three
she's a
things I
plant
don't know if
mom.
I was
A
gonna
plant
say
mom?
you just hit on
Yep.
so many things about me
Mhm.
personally. Plants. I have always known that I have a calling to work with horses. That has always been a thing that I've kind of avoided. And I don't have children, but I am very mothering. Wow. Oh my, that is so bananas. That's fucking bananas.
Astrology is pretty amazing.
So I have
Wow.
something to bring up here. This is kind of course, wild in the timing, but you know, that's how the universe works.
Should I take the
Um,
chart down or leave it up?
you can take that one down. Um, if you want to pull mine up, I will tell you a story and you will understand where I'm going with here.
Okay.
I was putting books on my bookshelf and I was excited to put things away that I hadn't looked at in a long time. And I found an assessment from the Insights to Interpersonal Development, basically a personality test that I had taken in 2002.
I took that a long time ago too. Yeah, I know the one.
And I was reading through it, and it was so funny because the results of the personality test was exactly like you were reading my natal chart.
Ah.
As I was reading some of the communication styles and the personality traits and things like that, I'm like, oh, that's my Leo sun. That's my Aries moon. That's my Taurus rising. And it was so wild to me as I was reading through this personality test, where I think that test is like over 100 questions that you
Mm-hmm.
answer.
Mm-hmm.
How many of the results were so similar with whenever you look at my natal chart.
Well, and that is another thing I noticed about the three of you. You all have fire suns. Yours is in
Mm,
Leo, and Anna-Lisa's and Adriana's is in Aries, right? But you all three also have fire suns. So that is another
yes.
commonality. Even though they're different, they're both, I want to shine. I want to be in the spotlight. I want to take action. I want to be at like the center of things, you know.
Yeah. And then my other question that has to do with that is that my sun, obviously it's in Leo, but there's
Hmm.
other things in Leo in the fourth house.
Hmm.
What would you say that all would have to do together? All the things in the fourth house that I have in Leo.
So the fourth house itself is like the house of property, home, ancestors, family. In traditional astrology, it was associated with the father. I think in modern astrology, it can sometimes be the father, sometimes the mother, but it sounds like for you, this is the father. And the sun is exalted in Leo. And so the sun, it's like the sun's home, the sun shines, the world revolves around the sun. So your heart is in your homeland and your ancestors. The sun is the boss of that, you know, and the sun was probably your father, like somebody you held in high esteem, and, you know, created this world around which you live in. Mercury is essentially working for the sun here. It's like a messenger for the sun, carrier of the sun. And the other point that's in there is just the IC, which simply tells me what's the lowest part of your chart. The part that is the opposite of the midheaven, your most personal home, ancestor, family lot. So you would definitely be somebody for whom, like having land, having a home, having strong roots is like vital to your well-being and part of your life. And that may not seem so apparent to you until you compare yourself with other people for whom that's not true. Like there are some people, well, for example, in my own chart, I only have one planet that's like down here, and everything in my chart is up here. So I don't feel a great sense of rootedness, right? For me, it's been about striving in the world, achieving in the world, like making my own mark. But you are a person like with a really strong sense of rootedness and home, whether it's a home you build yourself, one you inherited, like there's something about home and family that's really at your core.
Okay. Something I recently heard, I was listening to a financial podcast and it was talking about finances and astrology.
Mhm.
They mentioned Mercury, of course, being the messenger, but also being tied to finances. And that
Yeah,
was,
Mercury is kind of the merchant. So like classically, you would associate with Mercury with like transaction, sales, merchant behavior. It's not the only planet that is related to
Mhm.
finances. But in your case, Mercury does rule Gemini, which is your second house of your individual income. And so there's something probably about your home and your family that impacts your possession, your resources, your income. But it also may be that you additionally make money through your own merchant behaviors, like buying and selling and doing and stuff like that, right?
Okay.
So it kind of links those two houses together.
Okay. I was just curious because it seems a little bit different. It's not very straightforward in that message.
Right, right. And that is true. Like one of the measures of great wealth in a chart, and you see it in a lot of people who are like millionaires and billionaires, is a conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto or a sextile between Jupiter and Pluto. Because Jupiter is often showing great wealth. And Pluto sort of magnifies it and intensifies it. And like you think about plutocrat, you know, Pluto ruled like what is under the ground, like the land, the minerals, the oil, the gas, the diamonds, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But again, it depends on how it's configured in the chart, you know. And I'm just talking out of the top of my head, but if like it's been a while since I looked at his chart, but like when you look at Elon Musk's chart, for example, you can see that there was financial privilege in his life. You know, Bill Gates, there was financial privilege in his life. It was part of both an inherited legacy as well as what he did with a friend, you know, but that isn't necessarily true for everyone. Like I have a Jupiter conjunction, right, and mine has been much more about great learning, like really being lots of educational opportunities, travel opportunities. Like mine's been in my ninth house, which is about like higher education and travel and that kind of thing.
Okay. That's really interesting.
Yeah, but
Like
Mercury does signify like transactions, which is why Mercury retrogrades can be so aggravating, because it's like transactions don't go well, right? Like, or there's more propensity for the actual, you know, the daily business of life to not work. Venus is also associated sometimes with wealth, you know. It tends to be more like wealth of possessions, like jewelry, purses, like things that are luxurious.
Okay. That's really interesting.
I know that I feel like I could probably just end up talking to Denise at least for the rest of the afternoon, but we are just a little bit over an hour, and Denise, I don't want to take up all of your Sunday afternoon. Rev, do you have any more questions or points for Denise? Because I think I've got everything so far.
Yeah, well, where I was going to go next is I was just going to ask where you would recommend people who are interested in learning more about astrology, some good resources for them.
Sure. There's a lot of great things online these days. There's actually two websites. If you just want to like play around on a website, there's two that I would recommend that are both free. One is literally astro.com. It's like one of the oldest astrology sites. I think I've been using it since the late 1990s. And you can set up a free birth chart. You can look at there's reports you can pay for there, but there's also a lot of free stuff. So just play around. There's another really great astrology website that maybe isn't quite as user-friendly, but it's called astro-seek, seek.com. And a guy I know actually did this whole website himself in his spare time. He's a hobbyist, but it's amazing. Astroseek.com. He's adding to it all the time. And one of the fun things you can do there is you can look for like the people that share your birthday, people that share your placement. Like you can do a search for like celebrities that have their sun at 29 Aries. And so it can like help you see kind of people like you, as well as giving you all kinds of other tools. If you like telephone apps, the one I probably would recommend the highest is from Chani Nicholas. Chani wrote a great book called You Were Born for This that really talks a lot about the sun, the moon, and the rising sign and how they impact your life. She has been instrumental at sort of making astrology move away from a heteronormative cisgender perspective and sort of queering astrology. And so I really like her for that, but she's also quite well studied, and her astrology app is written by real astrologers who earn living wages, right? Like her bottom salary, she pays somebody of like $80,000 a year. Anyway, Chani, Chani app, and you can get a free version or a premium version. And I would suggest you at least look at the premium version a few months, because it'll give you so much more rich information about your birth chart, as well as transits that are happening. She also has meditations and mindfulness exercises, and she's magical. So every month she talks about like what to put on your altar this month for this new moon or this full moon. So I think that your listeners would really like it.
Yeah, I've recently downloaded the Chani app after listening to her Astrology of the Week Ahead podcast for a
Uh-huh.
while. And I definitely plan to get the paid version of the app in the next couple weeks.
Yeah,
Because there's so much information in there. It's so cool. And
it
I
is,
love
isn't it?
how she suggests, like you said, like rituals and things like that too. Ways to incorporate that with your magic. Because as someone who is historically very analytical, like myself, I'm like, great, but what do I do with this information?
Right.
So,
And now what? Right.
Yeah.
yeah. And that's something that I
And I
love.
just really love that. I really love the story of the company that she and her wife have built and
Hmm.
how they're treating people. And, you know, even when you buy things from her, she gives a certain amount of profits to like women in bad situations. And I can't remember the exact details, but it's
Hmm.
just it's good astrology and a high quality socially conscious company.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And what are you doing right now, Denise? How can people get in touch with you and the group based in New Orleans?
Thank you. So everything is at my website, which is astrologywithdenise.com.
Hmm.
If you're listening in the New Orleans area, I just started something this year that's been going really well, and I'm doing a new moon gathering um, every month. I have a friend who has a massage studio and wellness center in the Marigny. So we can only hold about 12 people in the room. So it's a small in-person gathering, and you have to buy a ticket for it. But I do a monthly astrology forecast at the new moon. But we include music and imagery and some meditation and reflection and journaling. So it's not just me giving information, right? It's like, what do you do with it? How do we work with it? Talking about our challenges and how we want to use it. So that's really fun for an in-person gathering.
Hmm.
I also do host the New Orleans Astrology Meetup, and we have monthly events. Most are in person, some are virtual. So if you want to sign up at meetup.com to the New Orleans Astrology Group, you're welcome to join any that are virtual. The next one I have is March 10th, and I'm actually teaching about aspects. We talked
Ooh,
about the aspects, about the blue and the red lines. So
yeah.
I'm going to dive into those, and I'm actually going to help people make flashcards for themselves about
Mhm.
aspects, so they really understand more richly what all the different aspects are and what they mean. Um, so that's coming up. I'm doing occasional psychic fairs around the country. I'm doing one in Sarasota, Florida in April, and another one in New Orleans in April. That's at my website. And of course, I offer individual consultations, you know, a one-to-one session talking about your birth chart. Or I also do other types of astrology that we've mentioned before, horary, which is like a divination method. I help choose auspicious dates and times for things. I actually was really blessed last week. A client I'd never met before hired to help me choose the best time for their cat to have surgery. They had 4 possible
Aw.
dates. And so we sorted through those dates to see where the astrology looked best for the cat to successfully make it through surgery. So, you know, I love helping individual people deal with their practical problems and what they really want to accomplish in life.
Oh, I
Wow.
love that. That warms my heart so much. And
I thought
that's
it
like,
would. I actually have had a number of people who've hired me for timing things about their pets. I remember one of my first horaries that I got paid for was helping someone choose when to adopt a cat. They had never
Oh,
had a pet
wow.
before. They wanted to make sure it was successful, you know. So yeah, it's not
that's
just
great.
for people, it's also for animals.
I love
I
that. And
am,
it shows
yes.
definitely some practical applications of something that can seem so out there.
Hmm.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
something that I
That's
really love about every time we speak with you, Denise, because you are so studied and you can tell that you come from a research background and being involved in medicine and things like that because you are very grounded and the way that you explain things is so clear. And it's awesome.
That's my goal. I really
yes.
want
Yes.
astrology to be useful.
Yes.
that you definitely make it that way. I am blown away by you and the information you've given today. Like literally, I've got so many pages of notes and little scribble scratches that, and thankfully we'll be able to watch this back because I definitely didn't catch everything. Denise, thank you just so much. This was just so cool, and I cannot wait to have you back on at the end of the season, and we'll see where everybody ends up in September, October.
Yeah, I look forward to
Yes.
it. Good
All
luck through
right.
April.
Yes, thank you.
Like, buckle up, hang on.
And that's the best ending note I think we can have. Denise says,
Yes.
buckle up, buttercup.
Right. And on that note, stay magical.
Stay magical.
Stay magical.